Deepak, how beautifully you brought forward the differentiators, actually. I mean, we've been a part of the industry, but really, I mean, the way in which you brought out the brand differentiators, the company differentiators in such a lucid manner, I only wish we had more people listening into it. It was beautifully brought forward. May not be on a lighter vein, Deepak, but maybe on a serious note also. I agree with one of the things which you mentioned, that the principle of complementary competence.
Absolutely.
I certainly agree with you on that. But having been friends for a long time, let me ask you one question, maybe in front of the people present here also. If the weakness of the boss is the strength of the subordinate, does the subordinate always survive?
Yes. If weakness of the boss is the strength of the subordinate, and boss understands how do we take advantage of his strength for the weakness that he has, subordinate will survive. If he doesn't understand how do you take advantage of his strength, which is his weakness, one of them will survive. So, complementary competence will survive. Competitive competence will definitely not survive.
You made a big sound bite there. You said, if he understands that I can leverage on his strengths and together we can take the corporate forward,
Yep.
together we can actually move forward as individuals also in our career.
Absolutely.
I think both of them will survive. And that's the key factor over there. Absolutely agree with you. And otherwise, if one of them, particularly the boss, is insecure, I think he develops a massive sense of insecurity. It could lead to several other things as well.
Because he doesn't have confidence in his strength.
You also mentioned the several brands and the company differentiators, the brand differentiators. Over the last 2 decades, you've been for more than 2 decades associated with the industry. Any particular strategic approach for a brand that you felt was strikingly different and made an impact?
The number 2 brand in our country is a generic brand. And the brand is Human Mixed-Tard. Insulin is generic. Insulin of Novo Nordisk, insulin of Eli Lilly are the same. But the number 2 brand in the industry was created on the differential of not creating differential at the doctor's chamber, but creating differential the way it is promoted, because they identified that their customer is not a doctor, their customer is patient. And they created the whole differential around the patient who is taking insulin. So they are the best example of servicing the patient and creating the differential in the so-called generic insulin market. So they are the benchmark for servicing the patient, identifying patient as customer and not doctor as a customer.
I was at a similar forum some time back and looking at differentiating factors. For years, we've been calling the first line people in our industry as a medical representative, maybe as a sales officer or whatever, Somebody asked this question to the audience, and a lot of people actually said, wow, this is different. But I'd like to just throw this across to you. They said, can we actually rechristen them and actually train them to be patient service representatives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think KK has made a very, very valid point. The future of the industry is not one who is holding doctors. The future of the industry is one who is holding patients. In fact, I feel that there is a business model that is about to happen. So one businessman will come and say that I have 1 million patients with me. So I can decide these patients will go to which doctor. I can decide these patients will go to which hospital. I can decide this patient will go to which pathology clinic, which radiology clinic. If one can have patient pool, and if that patient pool, where it will go for healthcare service, if that can be decided as a business model, that could be a future business model. And not how many doctors I know and how many doctors prescribe my brand. So if our medical representative starts servicing patients, I think the power will be in our hands, not in doctor's hands. Very good idea.
The more we get into specialized segments, with more biologics coming in and stuff like that, a lot of people are trying to differentiate. And, instead of having large field forces, people look at having task forces, more qualified people, maybe lesser number of doctors, but more scientific orientation. I know you mentioned about a lot of other things, I know that. But I think in the specialized zone, people are in some way trying to do that. Now, if you look at some of the higher end biologicals which are available abroad, okay, even if you look at, gene therapy and stuff like that people talk about, which is yet, to come into India, you reckon that there will be even an increased need for differentiation, which in my opinion will definitely be there. And if it is there, how do you think one would actually, how would the thought process go?
No, till now, what we have seen as companies here talking about NCE, R&D, sir sitting here, who is trying to research new molecules, the differentiator is the product itself. The product will differentiate if it has substantial value, which is not there in existing product or existing therapy. The product itself is the differentiator. You need to take the product to the market and then it differentiates. So like, for example, DPP-4, Januvia, the product itself was a differentiator in so-called diabetics market. So it had a great run of success. But when second DPP-4 came, what was the differentiator? It was not that vildagliptin is better than sitagliptin. It is the way they created the business model. Rather than going on their own, Novartis went to US vitamins. Same molecule, two different brands, let us go in the market and have a reach, penetrate. That is the difference. So, interestingly, when the new molecules also will come in, the first new molecule will have its space because of product differentiation. But the second molecule in the same family will have to create business differentiation.
Thank you, Deepak. Any questions for Deepak from the audience, please? All right, thank you very much for a very, very informative and very interesting talk. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break now for, thank you. We take a break now for tea and refreshments and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
My name is Nargad. Whatever amount you may have paid, you have to pay a little more now because you have paid for attending a class. Now it's going to be coaching class. So, so I charge you ₹1 for the whole group put together. Whatever be the, I think we are here to do professional justice to what we are committed to, and that's what we will do. So I'll go through this as if there are 300 people here. Very often it happens to stage artists also that flop shows do happen, but they go on as if life depends on that particular moment, right? I want to begin with my thanks to my teammate Bhupender Singh, who helped me set it up, and Meenakshi, who's sitting there. They were coordinating with me in the US to set this presentation up. I just came in this morning, so they have taken a lot of trouble to present it to you. I'm sure they are a little disappointed, but it happens in life. All of us learn some lessons. I was supposed to talk to you about transformative trends for pharma particularly. That will define, go back. That will define our future. The first point I want to remember, that I want us to remember here is, look at any industry. Somebody who can anticipate stakeholder expectations, they are the ones who will be more successful in the future. It's not technology, it is not talent alone, but somebody who can anticipate what is going to be required in the next 5–10 years. Classical example of that could be Steve Jobs of Apple. He was a tech to work for Wokhart, did a small consulting work for Wokhart Hospital. Hospitals dipping and hospital dipping. Is it competition? Yes, competition was there. But what we saw was that when the hospital started 2 years ago, the expectation was when the patient walks in, he gets a bed within 5 minutes. And 2 years later, the expectation was that a doctor is beside him in 2 minutes. Not that he gets a bed in 2 minutes, but the doctor is beside him in 2 minutes. So the same hospital, expectation levels changed. So anybody who can anticipate expectations is likely to be more successful in the future. This is what I think all of us as business executives, as entrepreneurs, we will need to remember. So what we'll chart out now is how will expectations, what are expectations now and how are they being met? What are expectations in the future by each of the stakeholder, and how we as an industry can work towards fulfilling those expectations. I'll take a first reference point of any industry for that matter. We are not talking about pharma now. Industry, there's an environmental factor and there's a stakeholder. The environmental factor will be macroeconomic factors, microeconomic factors, and stakeholder expectations in terms of what does the customer want, what the trade wants, so on and so forth. I want to stress here that in any other industry, the stakeholders are limited. Maybe 2, maybe 3. The moment you move, any industry to the number of stakeholders, and that's what makes pharma a little more complex industry. So let's look at what kind of stakeholders are there in pharma. Pharma, we are looking at, just sharpen it a little bit. We are looking at, in the environmental factor, we are looking at macro global factors, micro global factors, macro Indian factors on the environmental side. Like if the global economy is growing by, I think the global economy today is likely to grow by about 4 to 5%. Indian economy is likely to grow by 8%. So the global economy affects our economy to some extent. So there is a macro economy there, and there is a macro economy for India. Global healthcare may be growing by about 9–10%. Of global pharma is growing by 9–10%. Indian pharma is growing by 15–16%. So there is a micro factor there. So when we look at macroeconomic factors, microeconomic factors, is a factor around there. Then we look at stakeholders. Look at the number of stakeholders that we have in pharma. If you look at it a little carefully, you will have doctor groups as a stakeholder. In regulatory, we have 3 kinds of regulatory stakeholders for us. There is a price regulator for us, there is a ministry of regulator for us. Expectations be from us, and how will that change? And then we have doctor groups, we have patient groups and counselors, trade groups available to us, which is not available anywhere else to contend with. So when it comes to pharma, there are 7 stakeholders that we need to manage. Expectation in 2020, how will the expectation shift, and what do we as an industry do to fulfill those expectations to survive and grow? This that despite the complex, we call it, rather than any other industry, it's complex. This is complex because the number of 56,000 crore industry growing by about 15%. And it's something which I have observed for many, many years now, that whichever country you go to, pharma growth will be roughly double the GDP growth. And that's what should make us feel very proud, that we belong to a very, very progressive industry, despite the industry being complex. as an example, all of us know our industry is growing by 8-9%. Our pharma and our industry means GDP is growing by 8-9%. Pharma is growing by about 15%. US economy is growing by about 4-5% and growing by 8-9%. For the next many years to come, will always outgrow the GDP. I mean, for youngsters here sitting here who would like to look at many options for industry, pharma is a fantastic option to be. Any fear of recession? Even in IT, never in pharma, never in healthcare per se. If your pricing is proper, anticipation is proper, stakeholder needs are proper, you want to be. That probably explains why in India 20,000 companies, not 20,000 companies. That also explains why we have 350 nationally operative companies, because the size is big, the growth is double